Yes. Okay. Let me, if it's okay with you, is it okay if I show a few YouTube video clips of just the old Mahabharata show from the 80s? We can stop recording if that makes sense. Yeah? Okay. All right. And it'll just be literally, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes of clips to show. And I have them queued up. So anyway, we're going to talk about the Bhagavad Gita, which is such a delightful topic that I would love to share my love of that with all of you. I think it's so important that our college teaches this. I don't know if all colleges do, but I think it's so important because the Ayurveda is based upon actually the essence of all the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Puranas and the Shastras. Everything can be condensed into the Bhagavad Gita. It's like the cream on top of the milk into 7 verses. And Bhagavan Krishna, Lord Krishna, gives Arjuna, the disciple, this wonderful summary of Vedic philosophy known as the Bhagavad Gita. And in doing so, he imparts it to all of humanity. So I'm grateful that our college teaches this because it's very important for our fundamentals, whether we're teaching yoga or Ayurveda or both. So we're going to talk about the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita by topic. I'm going to really speed through this. This is just like a Whitman sampler of the Gita. You'll probably have to read about it on your own, but just to kind of get our feet wet for those of you who are not familiar. Just some really key concepts. And we'll talk about yoga systems and concepts covered in the Gita, okay? Because when we think of yoga, or as we pronounce it in the West, yoga, a lot of times people think of backward bending and asanas and pretzeling your body into various positions, and it's more than that. Yoga means union with God or union with the divine. So the Bhagavad Gita's chapters are divided into various yogas. So we'll talk about those concepts very quickly in brief, okay? I'm going to skip this slide because I'm sure Monica Ji will have a different assignment or quiz. So again, forgive me for any mistakes if Atulji is listening. The Bhagavad Gita, because he's really the one who teaches this. The Bhagavad Gita is about 20% of our material in the Sanskrit module. Gosh, no pressure. And so this will be the only presentation, I think, covering the Gita. Now, Monica Ji gave me 2 presentations, and they were both equally good, so I picked this one. It was an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. There was another one she sent me. Oh, there are 3, okay. So we can't cover everything in depth, so we'll just try to focus on the ones that are the most relevant. Okay, so the name Bhagavad Gita literally means Song of God. Bhagwan, all-powerful God, with a capital G, and Gita, which literally means a song. So it is, the background, a really quick background is that this was narrated on the battle, at the time of the Battle of Kurukshetra, just before the opening battle of the Mahabharata war, around 5,000 years ago. This was spoken by Sri Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna, to his friend and cousin Arjuna, like I mentioned earlier. And within the epic of the Mahabharata, which is the longest, they say the longest poem ever written in the history of mankind, within that ancient epic comes this Bhagavad Gita. So it's within that whole work called the Mahabharata, the epic. And it is 700 verses divided into 18 chapters. So the Mahabharata is an endlessly fascinating work, considered an itihasa, or a history, a historical document of Bharat, or ancient India. And it gives us many of our, it's so rich. So it has been people have commented on it and done plays and done movies and written books and TV shows. And it's a really fascinating story with literally thousands of stories within it and hundreds and thousands of characters. So if we have time, I'm going to show you a couple of clips from the 80s from a show called the Mahabharata, just the portions of the Gita. Again, you'll have to, if we have time, just to keep it a little interesting, but at the end. So the topics of the Gita are so vast, but we're going to boil it down to a few just for our purposes. One is Atma Tattva, which is the science of Atma, or the self. Who am I really at my core? Sankhya Yoga, which Pandit Atulji teaches very well, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. These are various types of practices that help unify our soul with the super soul, that union, that bond with God. That process is called yoga. So there are there's different means to approach God and to unite with Him. And these are the different types of yogas that are covered in the Bhagavad Gita. It also talks about renunciation or sannyasa. Renunciation, as far as, there are a few ways to do it. One is to wear orange and become a monk or a nun and head for the hills and meditate in a cave. But then there's also a practical aspect of how can I be a renunciate as a householder or as someone who is very much of and in this world? How can I remain sort of above it all? And the analogy often given in our literatures is like the lotus that grows in a pond of mud that, is surrounded by the muck and mire of material just existence, but grows unsullied kind of from that mud. So, these are well-worn, cliched sort of examples, but nonetheless beautiful, and they do the job of illustrating. Prakriti and Purusha, this has been covered. The three gunas or materials, quality of material nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, which is I believe has been covered already. The opulence of the Supreme Person, the divine or divya qualities and demonic or asuric qualities of human beings, the divisions of faith according to the three gunas, and really the final goal, which is liberation from the cycle of repeated birth and death, which we are all trapped sort of in. So Atma Tattva, the science of the self, is mostly covered in the second chapter. It's also called Sankhya Yoga, since it is very analytical. Sankhya means numbers, so this is a very numerically oriented chapter. This is kind of the ABC or the foundation for understanding the other topics of the Gita, sort of introduces many terms. It explains the permanence of the soul as opposed to the impermanence of the body. It explains the relationship of the soul, the Atma, to the subtle bodies, the subtle body, which is made up of mind, which is manas, intelligence, which is buddhi, and ego, which is ahankara, and the physical body. So as you know, we are not just this body, right? We have the five sheaths, the five koshas, which I don't know if it's been covered, but it will be. And yet these five sheaths that comprise our body is different from the Atma, which is the soul, which inhabits these bodies. It also talks about the transmigration of the soul Atma from one body to another, leaving the body behind. Krishna gives the example as leaving behind a pair of old clothing. Just like when clothing gets old, we toss it away. I don't know if I'm hearing some interference. I can't see. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think there's some feedback from a mic or something. Anyway, so the analogy is that you. Okay, I think someone could. Is everyone muted? Okay, maybe it'll work. So the Atma goes from one body to another, just as when our clothes get discarded, we don't change, the clothes change. So the Atma similarly doesn't change, it just simply changes its garb, its external garb. And then it describes the role of the subtle body during this transmigratory process, and then describes the impermanent nature of the material world. I am making it so dry. I totally know how dry I sound right now. So I'm going to try to spice it up a little bit with some TV clips and a little bit. You gotta get out of here. Okay, so Karma Yoga. Hold on just a second. I need to go because this is distracting me. Thanks. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. So Karma Yoga is work as sacrifice. This is covered in the 3rd chapter. So 2nd chapter, we talked about Sankhya Yoga. 3rd chapter, we're talking about Karma Yoga, which is work as sacrifice, how to become a Karma Yogi. I have to say, as an aside, that the word yogi, it's very disappointing. I hope none of our graduates will claim to be yogis, because that term is used very flippantly. Everyone who does a few asanas and back bends calls themselves a yogi. And I understand it's more from I practice exercise and yoga, but the term to call yourself a yogi is a very, very sacred title. And maybe I should just stop going off on a rant. But so the 3rd chapter talks about becoming a karma yogi. We can aspire to become a karma yogi. I don't think we can call ourselves one, but it describes the nature of karma or action, which produces good and bad results. It describes sacrifice as a means to freedom from entanglement and adverse reactions. It tells us that even good actions or good karma that have results that produce entanglement, mostly because of our ego, or expectations. Sometimes we do something good with an expectation of something in return, and that desire entangles us. So anyway, Karma Yoga is a 3rd chapter, which, as a system, advocates performing selfless work as a sacrifice without attachment to the results. Ma phaleshu. So it is a, I was going to start quoting. Basically, it is, you do your best and leave the rest to God. You do something for the sake of doing it without expecting anything in return. And that is a true Karma Yoga. It's sacrifice. And when we let go of the fruits of the action, we liberate ourselves from those karmic consequences. And this is very difficult to do. I try to work on this. I cannot say that I can. I'm basically reading a slide to you, and I read the Bhagavad Gita, but all of us struggle with this. At least I know I do. So even as much as I try to not have a reaction or expectation, there is one inside. Well, if I do something good, well, maybe I'll get a promotion at work, or if, etc. So that's natural. That's the shlok on the side that Manakaji just posted. So Jnana Yoga is the yoga of knowledge. This is covered in the 4th chapter. It describes the traditional means of knowledge received through succession or parampara, which is tradition. Do karma, yes, however, leave the results to me. It advocates accepting the guidance of a guru, someone who can point you in the right direction. And it gives you the knowledge as a means of discrimination to become free of other entanglements and come closer to union with the divine. Ashtanga Yoga, which is the 8-fold path. This is covered in the 6th chapter, also called Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, because its goal is meditation with full absorption and focus, which is known as samadhi. So these are, I think, familiar to many yoga practitioners. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, etc. Dharan, Dhyana. These are the 8-fold, this is the 8-fold way, the Ashtanga Yoga. And of course, it takes diligent practice and attention to practice. It's also known as Hatha Yoga or hard yoga. So it is a difficult process. It requires so much diligence and discipline. So this is one way of reaching the divine goal of liberation or moksha. Then there's Bhakti Yoga. This is the 9th and 12th chapters, and again summarized in the 18th chapter. You'll see the 12th chapter is completely devoted to bhakti, and this is absolutely, my opinion, this is just my opinion, the sweetest path for achieving our goal of liberation. And the Bhagavad Gita presents many different ways to reach the path. So there are some of us who are more intellectual, who like Jnana Yoga, the intellectual. Some of us like Ashtanga. Some of us like Bhakti. I feel Bhakti is sweet because it's personal. It's loving devotion. It's not so dry. And oftentimes, those who are self-realized, if you reach God through Bhakti, you automatically accumulate knowledge. If you reach God through just knowledge, you automatically acquire bhakti in many cases, because they're like two wings on a bird. So both are needed and both are obtained. So Bhakti Yoga is described as something very personal. It's confidential. Krishna shares with Arjuna because Arjuna is Krishna's devotee, his friend, his cousin. And it's a very personal relationship. Arjuna calls Krishna, hey Krishna, hey Yadava, hey Sakheti. He calls him, hey, hey friend, hey, he just is completely, they're buddies, and he eats with him. They play together. They hang out together. It's such a personal, sweet, loving relationship, and so. This is when we read the Gita, what we are privy to is that private moment of devotion between Arjuna and Krishna, where Arjuna becomes the devotee and Krishna is the guru. And we get to watch that interaction. We get to listen in on their conversation on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So I'll talk about how that happened. But it's a very personal conversation. It is characterized by adherence to certain rules, performing devotional practices with a sense of sambandha or relationship. This is, again, a very personal relationship with your God. And these types of relationships with Bhagwan are also called rasa. So I know I'm kind of rushing through this, but there are 9 rasas or nine modes of emotion in Sanskrit literature. And, there are, I don't know how to really put this in words, but you can look at Krishna as a friend, right? You can look at him as a friend, as a best friend. You can look at him, so there's that friendship. You can look at him as a parent, as a mother-father figure. You can look at him as a child. Yashoda, Krishna's mother, was fortunate to have Krishna born to her. She loved him as her child, just like Mary loved Jesus as her child. There was that beautiful mother-child relationship. You can look at Krishna as your guru, your teacher. So these are different modes of sweetness, you could say, or modes of love, different relationships that you can have with God, depending on your own temperament, your own preference, your own personality. These are the types of relationships. I like to look at Krishna as a friend and as a parent, but that's me. Some people like to look at him as their child. So anyway, many followers of bhakti follow practices or sadhana reflecting activities they aspire to continue after liberation from the material world. Okay. So renunciation is the 5th chapter. It applies knowledge to achieve detachment. It hinges on non-involvement in work for fruit of gain. So again, this is another way of, another yoga another way to achieve the same goal. Prakriti and Purusha, which Pandit Atulji really does a great job of explaining, which I cannot do it justice right now, but Prakriti and Purusha are covered in Sankhya Yoga, covered in the 13th chapter as well of the Gita. It is, we also talk about in the 13th chapter the self or the Atma, who is the witness, who is the knower of the body, who is also known as the Sakshi, who is inhabits the body and knows the past and knows the future, and is a spark of the divine. Bhagavan Shri Krishna describes himself as the knower of all bodies. He tells Arjuna, I am, literally, I'm the sustainer of this universe. I'm the father, I'm the grandfather of this universe. There's no one, I have always known you, and I will always know you. And he knows everyone, because he inhabits everyone. He is that soul. He is that Atma. That is that spark of Krishna that is within all of us. He is within us as the fire that digests our food. This is important in Ayurveda, because when we eat, we are fueling that fire, and that is Krishna. So we have to be careful of what we put in our bodies, right? So we every time we eat something, it is not just simply filling our food, our stomach. It is a yajna, which is a fire sacrifice. And it is an offering to that Krishna within us. So anyway, 13th chapter also describes the 24 elements of Sankhya, describes the divine manifested as Purusha within the world, and Atma and Paramatma, soul and super soul, as the indwelling witness, that Sakshi principle I was talking about. 10th chapter is fantastic. It's really great because I actually really like the 10th chapter, because Krishna talks about himself in the superlative. I am the best of the best of all the, he will say, of all the mountains in the world, I am Mount Meru. Of all the, he goes around and explains that whatever you see around you, if it's the best of the best, that is me. And basically to try to tell us that he is everything. He's really the universe. He's everything. So he described various features of this world and as examples of his potencies, his qualities, his powers. And in the 11th chapter, which is really interesting, he shows his universal form to Arjuna. I am time, I am destroyer of all things. So in the chapter 10 is sort of a prelude to chapter 11. He's now kind of given Arjuna like a good bolstering of philosophy up until chapter 10th. And then he talks about himself. Well, who am I? And he talks about his role in the world and who he is, and gives Arjuna various examples. And in the 11th chapter, he gives Arjuna a special pair of divine eyes. He says, Divyan dadami te chakshuhu pashyame yogam aishwaram. I give you divine eyes so that you may view my supreme form. Because Arjuna's fleshy eyes would not be able to withstand the sight of Krishna in his universal form. So in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna assumes his form of, which is unimaginable to us as humans, with these eyes. It's nothing we have seen with our fleshy eyes, in which he shows Arjuna that he is time, he is devouring, he is death, he is all of these things, and he's just crushing the universe. And Arjuna sees this form of Krishna, which is terrible to witness, and he's scared. He's actually scared out of his mind, and he says to Krishna, I can't handle this anymore. Please stop. Please come back to your simple form in which you're my friend and we're discussing life together. Come, assume that dear form. I long to see that form. So Krishna sort of removes that form, which is too much for Arjuna to bear, and he resumes his gentle form. So again, that tells you Arjuna, what kind of relationship Arjuna had with Krishna, a friend. He says, yeah, I know you're all these great things, but I just want you to be my friend. So that's the 11th chapter, and it's described in detail. Krishna's thousands of tongues, and he's swallowing the world, and he's chewing things up, and he's really fascinating. 16th chapter, divine and demonic nature. Let me see. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I think I'm okay. It's been about 30 minutes. So divine and demonic nature is covered in the 16th chapter. Divine qualities, namely peacefulness, truthfulness, mercy, kindness, knowledge, respect for nature and for the elder, for our elders, self-restraint. And the aspects of demonic qualities are the attitude that I am the enjoyer and controller. It's that ego that I am everything. I can do as I please with no consequences. I will vanquish all of my enemies and enjoy my life without limit. So these are covered in the 16th chapter and discussed. 17th chapter talks about faith as sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic, the three modes of existence. I think if I remember, Manakaji or someone may have just written something in the chat a little while ago about the types of people who reach out to God at what time and with what type of faith. And also talks about food, austerity, charity, according to these three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And this is also important for us as Ayurvedic practitioners. Liberation or moksha is covered in the 18th chapter. This is the culmination of the Gita. It's the last chapter. So having described life in the material world as an endless cycle of sometimes going up the evolutionary scale and sometimes going down, reincarnation, coming into different bodies. It's like a game of chutes and ladders, right? You know, have you ever played that game where you, because of your karma, you could be at the top of the game board about to win, and you have to slide down the chute and you're back at square one. So that's how sometimes karma takes us through these cycles of birth and death. Sometimes you have human form, sometimes you have animal form. So finally, Sri Krishna talks about how to end the cycle. Yes, and when someone passes Kirtan and Bhagavad Gita is done as a last rite, absolutely. Krishna tells Arjuna, give up all other concept of dharma and just surrender to me. Do not fear. He says, Ma shucha. Ma shucha means do not fear, I shall protect you. How does he say it? I forget now the shloka. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. I will not forsake you. I will not abandon you. I will protect you. So give up all other concepts of dharma. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam braja. Come to me alone. Surrender to me alone. Devote yourself to me. You know, it's that concept of you walk one step towards me and I walk 1,000 towards you. It's kind of like that. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. I will liberate you from all the consequences of any sinful sinful actions that you may have done or committed. I will break those karmic ties for you and I will protect you. Ma shucha, don't fear. So I know I did a really, I'm like listening to myself and cringing because I did a really rushed job on the Gita, and it's like such a dear topic, and I'm a rambler, and so I was really conscious of that and tried to wrap up in 30 minutes, which probably was maybe not a good thing. But it's really impossible to summarize the entire Gita this briefly anyway, so even if I gave it 15 more minutes, it would still be not good. The only way you can experience it is to pick up a copy and read it. Manjulaliji and Atulji will point you towards several wonderful Vaishnava masters who have written commentaries on the Gita, which make it easy for us to understand in plain English. And I just wanted to show you, I don't know if I can do it, share my screen on YouTube, and maybe because they're YouTube videos, Monica G, maybe you cannot record. I don't know the policies, but I just wanted to show you from this old show from the 1980s, what the Gita kind of looked like or how it was. Yeah, they're just a few minutes. Okay. So what I'm going to show you, we have about 15 minutes, is where Dhritarashtra, the blind king, okay, he has 100 sons named, and they're called the Kauravas. And his sons are evil. The 100 sons are evil, bad people. And they wage a war against the Pandavas, who are 5 brothers. Arjuna is one of them. I'm going to make a long story very short, but you'll have to watch the show to find out. But Dhritarashtra is blind, and he asks his charioteer, Sanjay, who happens to have divine vision, who has clairvoyance and clairaudience. And he's sitting in his palace, and he asks Sanjay, well, today is the day of the battle. I wonder what's going on. Can you tell me what's going on? What are my sons doing? What are the Pandavas doing? What does the battlefield look like? I'm eager to know because my sons are at war. And it is through the medium of Sanjay, and the reason I'm telling you this is because if it weren't for Sanjay, the Bhagavad Gita would not have reached us. So Sanjay is that instrument through which the rest of the world is privy to that very intimate, private conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Because what Sanjay does next is he basically narrates the entire Gita to the blind king. And then in that way, we are able to be an audience as well. So let me show you that clip. Let me see if I can escape. Does that work? Okay. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And he tries to tell him what happens next. So he kind of looks off to the distance, and then he sees the battlefield. And that's that clip. So he tells him the armies are arranged kind of on both sides, facing each other, etc. Anyway, so that's one clip. We can stop. And then the next, it's the same actually. This and he looks across the battlefield and he sees his own family members. And it's a long story, but some of the good guys of his family had to fight for the bad guys. Some of his dear, his guru and his teachers and several good people were obligated for whatever reasons, for various reasons, to fight for the bad side. So when he sees that, he really freaks out. You can see that he is trembling. This is the first chapter of the Gita. Gandivam sansute hasta tokcheva paridayate. The Gandiva slips from his shoulder, his mouth gets dry, his hair stands on end, his legs buckle, and he just slumps into his chariot. And he does not want to fight his family. He says it's not worth it. It's all this for some land and for a kingdom. And so this is this is Krishna on the screen, who is his charioteer, who has, even though he's God incarnate, he has taken the role as his charioteer, which back then even, was a kind of a chauffeurish position. It was a humble position. You can see the charioteer sits below the warrior. So Krishna, later on when Arjuna really knows who Krishna is and that he's divine God, Arjuna feels bad that, oh my gosh, I treated you just as an ordinary friend. And so anyway, it's just a very touching thing to watch. You have to, if you watch this on YouTube, just keep in mind this is from the 80s, and the special effects are really bad and really cheesy. But it might give you a little bit of the insight into, just set the mood a little bit about what that time looked like.
Yeah, I was in 10th standard when this used to come on TV.
Yes,
it was a long time ago.
I went to the sets. I went watched them shoot this in Bombay.
Yeah, this was the whole India used to come. The entire India used to be shut down when this used to air.
Yeah, everyone loved it. All religions, we
the $2 sausage McGriddles. No eggs.
Somebody is
someone's ordering McDonald's.
That is all right. So that's it.
Is it okay if was it okay I said that? I just feel like these days, please remember that that yes, thank you. Please remember that yoga, and especially because I want our school to be different. The word yoga is often cheapened, and any Tom, Dick, and Harry who wears $80 pants and can do a back bend calls themselves a yogi, and it's just really, as far as cultural misappropriation, it's quite upsetting, because if you were a yogi, really truly you have understood how to transcend the cycle of birth and death. And you have no fear of death. There are many definitions of yogi, but you have come beyond the body. You're definitely not of body consciousness. So I just have a really, really strong, I maybe blog about this one day, Monica G, and just share it so I'm more articulate when I write. But just the word, hey, I'm a yogi, flipped around, just tossed around in conversation is not good. And I understand it means more like, hey, I'm really into this form of exercise, but please be aware, we should be aware, our school should be aware that it's much more than that. It's an entire way of life and philosophy. Anyway, I'm done with my soapbox, and I hope all of you do pick up the Gita and give it a read, and I'm sure Atul ji and Monica ji will give you some great resources as to whom to read, who are the best commentators out there. Any questions? Yes, it is really, Ashley, it is so hard. We all struggle. I struggle. It is really hard to live the Gita. All we can do is try. All we can do is try.
What was your takeaway from whatever you understood, Ashley? What was your, takeaway from it? I can listen to it in the back. It's playing on your computer, Parnaji.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh no. Well, let me stop that. Let me mute myself. That's easier.
Well, the first thing you want to understand is we are not this body, we are the soul. So nowhere in the history of any religion will you find anyone talking about the soul. The soul is made of, it cannot get wet, it cannot grow, it cannot decrease in size, it cannot die, it cannot get burnt, it cannot be hurt by weapons, it cannot be cut into half. So where will you find, what is the soul? Is it some like abstract thing? It is the size of 1/10,000th of your hair. Yes, nainam chindanti shastrani nainam dati pavakaha. Exactly. I would love to read, you wrote a small paper on Gita. I would love to read it. You should absolutely share it. I mean, that's why, Atul is and, we'll get Aparna ji to write. She's an amazing writer. She wrote a blog on gods and goddesses. You should totally read. No, you should read it, because if you inspire her, she will start writing again. She's really good. Yeah, so number one is, we are not the soul. We are not the body, we are the soul. And, every time we die, our soul gets a new body. That's your number one. And that's what you need to study. And then Megan wrote something, action without attachment. That's what your takeaway was. Yeah. So action without attachment, to get to the point where we're doing action without attachment, is the goal of the yogi. But it's impossible. How can, it is really, really hard, right? Yeah, that would be, yeah. How can you not expect? Because we are in this body. It is really hard. And Krishna has taught me lessons like that, but these are hard lessons, to surrender and always expect. When I have a problem, I just tell Krishna, it's your problem, it's your college. He takes care of it. Yeah. All right. Do you, we have 15 minutes. We can do a little bit of yoga therapy, or we can do a Q&A session. How do you want to do it?